Hello, hello.
How's it going, everybody? So we hope you're having a nice Saturday. We're already deep into the second semester of this year. I can't believe it. And we're very deep into the Firebase series. We're almost finished.
And Dalton's back.
And Dalton's back.
Yeah, back.
We've missed Dalton. So today we're going to be focusing primarily on Firebase Analytics, a small subset which is of Google Analytics. And this is starting to get towards the part of our app building process where we're looking to get some user engagement and figure out how our users are interacting with our app. Andrew, Dalton, is there anything that you particularly like about Firebase Analytics?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I haven't had a lot of exposure before, like kind of preparing this event and looking into Firebase Analytics before. But I learned it's pretty cool. Like, it allows you to pretty much track how your users interact with your website and log different events, depending like what is important for you, which events on your platform. If you're doing a portfolio, maybe it's like some projects that people view. If you're doing an e-commerce website, if people view your products, like that's the important information you want to track. And Firebase Analytics really allows for that. It's a pretty cool integration, in my opinion.
I love it as well.
Yeah, I definitely feel like it's a powerful tool. There's a lot that you can definitely do with it. And I think that's really what I like about the tool is how much you can use it for and how powerful it is.
So without further ado, should we show some Firebase Analytics?
Yeah, just one quick thing. As always, if you have any questions during the workshop, please post them in the YouTube comments, or also follow the Discord link outside the Valley. Think Outside the Valley Discord. We're always on there. If you have any questions after the workshop as well, we will follow up. And if the code doesn't work for you for some reason or something like that, please let us know. We're happy to help there.
I think one of the things that we can do before we hop into some slides is also maybe just show the e-commerce site that we've built and what we've got for this week. So Andrew, would you mind sharing your screen?
Sure. Actually, give me 1 sec. All right, almost there. Let me just bring this in. Okay, so that's, hope you can see this. This is what we're gonna be demoing for you and the code that we'll be showing during this event. So same old stuff. The only thing new on the website is this cart button. So we added the cart functionality where you can check out your products, fill in your billing information, your shipping information. You can basically click into different products. Give it a few seconds. Now you have this add to cart button. So when I click this, your product will be added to the cart. I hope this is the latest version, by the way, Raf. Kind of put me on the spot, but I hope this works.
Oh, sorry, yeah. I also saw we're supposed to have a notification.
Yeah, I think it's going to be easier if you show the...
Okay, I've got the development version. I think that we're still waiting on the site to deploy.
Yeah, because we literally just done a deploy before starting the events. I'm not sure if that's going to be the latest version of here. So I think if you share your screen, that would be optimal.
Okay. Can you see my screen? Does it look okay?
We cannot yet. At least I don't see your screen.
Sorry, 1 second. Try it again. How about now?
Okay, yeah. So.
Okay. So since we can click on individual products, we can add them to the cart, and this is what we're looking for. The nice pretty toast. So we've got nice messages, but here's the important thing is that we're doing all this interaction from the site. We've got these products, and then we've got a place to add some shipping information. Once you do that, we can see that we're allowed to add some billing information, and then we're allowed to make a purchase. And the important thing is that these are steps in a website that's not common. It's fairly common for all e-commerce websites. And so Firebase has these built-in event triggers that allows you to track how many users are actually going through this process and what are they doing on your site. Are they adding items to their cart and then leaving, or are they adding items to their cart and then purchasing? This is the real nuts and bolts of what analytics is. So I think without further ado, we can go into some technical details. So in general, the idea about analytics is to be collecting events. So some of these events are going to be pre-built that come from Firebase and from Google Analytics, and we just tap into them. And then some other ones are custom events that we can specify for our specific needs. Then we'll talk a little bit about conversions and how you can use these in the Google AdWords platform. And then lastly, we'll talk about some user segmentation and how you can build your audience. So to give some specifications about analytics, it's a free service that you get with Firebase. It allows you to break your users up into segments called audiences. And you can then take that data and export it to Google's BigQuery function. And that allows you to do some really powerful stuff, some machine learning models and a lot more. So some terminology, an event is pretty much anything that a user does on the site. It could be anything from a click to adding information to purchasing to really any user interaction with the site. And then a conversion event is something that is believed to result in some monetary gain. So if we were talking about the real world, having a billboard outside and then that being the direct cause of the user or a person rather walking into your store, that would be considered a conversion. So in the digital space, if somebody was to click on an ad and then they came to your site and ended up buying something, you would say that they came from an ad and they converted. It's a conversion event. And the next big thing that it ties into is AdWords. So AdWords is Google's ad platform service, really, and it allows you to market your website or mobile applications on Google's search network and their display network, as well as their partner networks. And it's a really powerful marketing tool, but being able to use conversions properly can save you a lot of resources and a lot of time. BigQuery is a database which collects all your information about events in your website, and that can be anything from crashes if you're using Crashlytics to analytics to your cloud functions, and that's something that we'll speak about next week. Funnels is sort of the flow that your users go through on your app. So if a user first opens up their browser and opens up your website, then they go through the entire process of looking at a specific category and then an item, adding to the cart, and then that resulting in a purchase. That could be one funnel. Or you could have specifically just the adding to cart portion of it, separate funnel. Just the payment, separate funnel. And we'll demonstrate some of those in a bit. And then your audiences, I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier. This is just segmented groups of users. So you could have users who have made a purchase and users who have not made a purchase. You could have users that have added something to their cart and then left the site. And these are all really useful because you can use that to, say, for example, send a promotional notification to a user that was on the site, interacted, added something to the cart, but then left. And then finally, retention is just a measure of how well your users are engaging with your app over time. Did a user come to your app this week and then return the following week and then the following week? Or was there a sudden influx of users this week, but the following week it dropped off and the following week even more? These are the kinds of things you'd like to be monitoring in an app. So some of these events that gets triggered are automatically collected. So it doesn't matter if your events are custom or if you're using the pre-built events. These 5 events over here are always going to be collected by analytics. So essentially it's just what screen they're looking at, how big is the screen, where they're coming from, and what's the language. And then these are some pre-configured events that are given specifically for e-commerce sites. So there's a big list, and you can, if you're watching this later on, you can pause the video and have a look at them now or while I'm speaking. But the ones that I've highlighted are ones that I would imagine are going to be considered conversion events. So things that we think might result in a payment. So initiating a checkout process or adding some shipping information, or obviously if an item has been purchased, we would consider that to be a conversion event. But similarly, something like adding to a wish list, that might also be a conversion event because you expect those items to be purchased eventually. And I think I can use this to demonstrate quickly on the actual documentation. So if you go to the Firebase documentation under the analytics section, is my screen big enough, by the way, Andrew, Dalton?
Yeah, I think it's good.
Okay.
Maybe a bit bigger, but it's good.
So under this analytics section, you can see that there's just standard events, but over here you can see there's a measure e-commerce section. So this is specifically for e-commerce implementations, and it's everything from selecting products from a list to viewing details, adding, removing them from a shopping cart, and you can see how they believe you should be implementing the e-commerce analytics tags. Now, it's one thing to note that these are just recommendations. You can theoretically just pass any information that that you find useful, but this is just how they recommend you use these built-in events.
Just a small comment, Raf, as well. All of the, you showed the list of bullet points, all different events that we can log, right? Those are just words. In the actual code, though, those will be represented with some IDs and keys, which already, as you mentioned, they are pre-built with Firebase. So a very common pattern that you will see with Firebase in general and with Firebase services is that it tries to predict the most common patterns that you will follow in an application, but it also allows you to include any custom events or any custom data that you want, right? You can either use what is already built for you, which literally you can start a e-commerce website in 10-15 minutes, right? Because everything is already for you there. But if you want more flexibility, if you want to extend your library of events, you can definitely do that. We will show you later on how to add custom events and log those.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, we have a perfect example of this. They do have a built-in event for viewing a list of products. So in our case, this would be viewing the categories. And then similarly, they have an event for viewing an individual product's details. And so in our case, this would be viewing the product itself. However, we have implemented this using our own event names. So instead of view item and instead of view item list, we have view category and view product information. And so, it's relatively the same thing, but we've just implemented it with our own custom tags. And you could extend upon the built-in ones too, if you like, or you could make completely different ones. It's very flexible.
Yeah.
But very good point. Thanks for reminding me. Some of the other pre-configured events are user-driven events. So this is a including sign up, log in, log out, whether or not the user is watching a video, how much of that video they're watching. So I've highlighted some things that I would consider conversion events. If a user is sharing information from your site to other friends, or if they are watching an entire video. Say, for example, you are trying to build a videography site, a portfolio for a videographer, and you want to make sure that their content is being watched. These are analytics events that you can consider conversions. If you can get the right users to be converting, in air quotes, a sign up is considered the same thing. One other thing I think that it's important to mention is that these events that I've put here are web specific. They are mobile specific events like in-app purchase or app download or app update. And having an app download, I assume, would also be considered a conversion event. So just an example of how we would implement an event. So in this case, it would be adding an item to a user's cart. So there's two things that we have. We have the actual event name, and then we have some information associated with that event. So we've got the add to cart event name. And this is another thing that's important to note is that if you want to have these built-in functionalities like add to cart, they do have a little bit of a different implementation in the UI in terms of how they show you certain things. For example, the items will get rendered a little bit differently if you use something other than add to cart. So if you do want to take advantage of some of the benefits that they have with the built-ins, make sure to just use the correct naming tags, and those can be found in the Firebase documentation too. So just an example for adding to cart, they recommend that you would include the currency, the value of the item, and then the item as an object, but really it's they want it as a list of objects, even if it's only one item, and then the quantity of the items that have been added. So if you've got, if the user has selected 4 shoes that are the same item, then you would specify that quantity over here. And it's really just as simple as saying analytics.log event. Analytics is probably one of the easiest things to implement and one of the most powerful. So that's something that's really awesome about Firebase and about Google Analytics in general. We are using analytics.log event because we have said analytics is equal to firebase.analytics as a function call. So just keep that in mind, that if you're doing it from scratch and you don't have an analytics analytics variable, then it would be firebase.analytics with the parentheses .log event. The next thing that we'll kind of talk about is collecting some user properties. And this is in general used to distinguish between different types of users. And then you can group those different types into audiences. It is, however, important to know that some properties cannot be collected as they're reserved by Google. So Google will show you this in the analytics dashboard, but they won't allow you to save this information about users. So, unless you manually collect it and save it, with your own regard, but that's probably not the right thing to do. So, but you shouldn't be including the age, gender, and interests in your manual event logging. They will take care of that as a demographic property. Predominantly, you'll be associating your users instead of by some defining factor like their name. You'll just use their user ID. So it's relatively anonymous if you're exporting the data somewhere. But to set it, it's as simple as saying analytics.set user ID for web. and then you'll pass in the ID of the user. And then some custom properties is really anything that you would like to keep track of. So in this example, we would like to maybe consider what the favorite brand or least favorite brand of the user is. And this could be really useful if you are, for example, showing a list of featured products. And this is something that we can talk about in 2 weeks' time. We'll be doing remote config and some A/B testing. It'll be very useful. You can show the products that are featured but tailored to a specific user. So if you know that the favorite brand of that user is Nike, we can show them more Nike shoes than anything else, or shirts, or any other item, for example. I think I was wondering if we should maybe go into some code, but we'll talk about this briefly. One other thing that's really cool about Firebase, and we're actually going to use this, so I won't speak too much about it right now because we'll show you what it looks like live, is that you can track these events that are happening in real time, and you can use these funnels to determine how your users are using your app. So this is actually the debug view that we're looking at on the right. And this is the funnel, so sorry for the name that we messed up, but the debug view is what will be changing real time, and it allows you to see, a user has viewed the cart, and then they began the checkout process, and then they added their shipping information and payment information, and then they made a purchase. So it just shows you, how the user is interacting with your site, but then that information gets put into the funnels. So this is where you actually monitor how users are navigating through the app. And here you can see that out of the 350 events that were a category view, so looking at all of the shoes, or looking at all of the bags, looking at all of the hats, only 114 of those events turned into an actual product view. So the user clicked on an individual product, and then even less of those turned into an add to cart. So this just shows you that, obviously it will decrease, but it can help you monitor how much that's decreasing. And, theoretically, you'd want it to be as little. So as many people that are looking at your products would also be adding those products to the cart.
Yeah, I think you were asking, Raf, what is my most favorite kind of feature of Google Analytics? I think funnels is the most fundamental one for me, because it literally allows you to see how your users navigate through your website start to finish, right? You literally see how many users entered your website, and then how many users actually bought a product from the website, right? So it really allows you to segregate and also pinpoint the places where users have problems navigating to the next section, right? Let's say 50% of the whole users that entered my website didn't even go to the cart, to the checkout. So probably I want to modify the way I'm doing the card display, or maybe I need to make the button more obvious or something like that. So it really gives you some insight on how your user experience works in your app. And together with all the event logging, it really helps you. Those statistics are very, very valuable in my opinion.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. It's really rewarding, if you ask me as well. I mean, when you spend so much time developing an app, you want to see, how is it being received? And if it's something small, as you said, just maybe making the cart icon a little bit bigger, or changing the color, or some small tweaks here and there, you can see how those changes impact the reception of your app or your website. And I agree, it's really, really cool.
Yeah, and I think in general, sorry, Raf, go ahead.
No, it's good, you can go.
Okay. I was just going to say that in general, the idea behind analytics is that you can write any website you want. You can be you can have amazing UI. You can make everything perfect and work smoothly. But analytics is what allows you to see where your users are and what problems they have with your website. So it doesn't matter how perfect your code is. If your users don't go to a certain feature, if you don't know that statistic, you will never know what the problem is and what you need to change later on. So I think that's like a general idea of analytics as well, where it allows you to see the back end perspective, not in the source of programming, but not in the sense of programming, but more in the sense of what is happening in real life, what your users are looking at in your app. And I think that's very powerful.
It is really powerful. I agree, and I've worked with Google Analytics before, and I've had to use some other analytics softwares before as well, and it doesn't compare. Google Analytics really is one of the most powerful, not only because of their data collection, but also because of how easy they make things to visualize. This is quite easy to see that we have a significant drop-off between the amount of products that are being viewed and the amount of products that are being, from the time that a user views a category to the amount of events that turns into a product being viewed. In other words, we're losing a lot of people from the categories viewed to the products viewed, but at the same time, people that are viewing a product are likely to add it to their cart. So these are things that we can learn about our users, and we can sort of refine that model of how our app is being consumed as we go. But
yep.
As we go further on to the next slide, these are some of the next steps that we can do once we have a lot of analytics configured. This is really where analytics shines the brightest. This is when you can use it with remote config to send certain audiences notifications. Say, for example, we spoke a little bit earlier about a user adding an item to their shopping cart, but then bouncing. In other words, they leave the site. You might want to maybe send a toast or some notification to that user saying, hey, come back. If you come back, we'll give you 5% off that item you were looking at. Or the same would be true if you have a subscription model. If a user has unsubscribed, you can use those analytics events to send them a notification saying, you can get 50% off your subscription. Really, any analytics events you have, you can run some remote config changes. In fact, we'll even try and demonstrate this in 2 weeks' time by having the featured products section that will be able to determine what the user's preferences are and then display a selection of products that are tailored to them specifically. And that would be a merger between remote config and analytics. And then in that same mindset, you can have A/B testing. So we looked at the funnels, and Andrew mentioned that if you possibly increase the button for the carts, the sizing, you might get some more people adding stuff to their cart. Or maybe you think to yourself, if I change the cart from green to blue, I might get some more people adding to their cart as well.
And those are very bold examples, right? Like usually it's not as simple as that. Probably you would either change the position of some button or literally just reduce the number of transitions you have or the number of pop-ups you have at your website. It might be more complex. Maybe it's like different behavior of your sign-in or like how you onboard your users on the app. That might impact different parameters. But yeah, the point being the same. Like you want to test 2 different scenarios and see which one does better.
Yeah. And I think honestly that that sort of thought train is true for this entire series, is that we've shown you a good deal of what Firebase can do, but there is a massive level above what you can take this to. Like when people talk about Firebase being a prototyping application, I couldn't believe that to be further from the truth. You can do whatever we have shown in this series and take it to another level and build some really incredible applications.
I can believe that. You can definitely prototype with Firebase, but you can also do much more.
Yeah.
you build basically real applications with it.
Yeah, and I think that the prototyping argument is really a testament to how fast you can put an application together more than anything.
One thing I'm going to add in this slide as well, one thing we might include in the next session, it might not make too much sense right now, but you can also listen to the analytics events that you log and trigger some different functions that will do whatever you want for you, right? Like send emails, update your Firestore, update your users if you want to. So we might include that also in the next session and next week when we go into Firebase functions, so stay tuned for that.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I completely forgot about that. Yeah, so I mean, if you've got an analytics event of an item being purchased, you could send a user an email saying, thank you for purchasing. Or even if you've got a user who has added to cart and then left the site, that's a separate segmentation. You could send those users an email saying, hey, come back.
Exactly.
I completely forgot about that. Thank you very much, Andrew.
No worries.
Okay, if I'm not mistaken, that's the end of the slides. So we could probably jump into the code.
Yeah.
Oh, whoopsie. I don't think that there's going to be, too much emphasis placed on the actual code, like how did we do the HTML and the shipping information and stuff like that. But we will just show quickly how did we actually trigger those analytics events.
We can also go over and show, just to reiterate on some Firestore basics, how we implemented the cart functionality and maybe show it on the backend just for people that are interested.
Yeah, definitely a good point. So let's actually start. We'll start with that.
Yeah.
So over here we actually went to this through here. So we had to do some workarounds in a way because it's relatively difficult to pass an object through in a template string. So we added a function to the window, and this is an awesome tip that Andrew told me, is that the window object actually can, persist through multiple screen changes, and it can contain a lot of different properties on it. So you can set a property on the window, and we just called it add cart. It's an unnamed function, anonymous function, and we both add an item to the cart, and here we are allowed to pass in the actual product, the full product, the object, as well as showing a toast. Nice, pretty toast. We love our toast. Oh, whoopsie. I'm not looking to show a toast right now. We're looking to add to cart. So we configure our analytics params. We specify the add to cart, and so this is what is logging our analytics. And then we specified in our Cloud Firestore a cart subcollection for each user's document. So let's see what that looks like in the console. There could possibly be a better way of implementing this if somebody has a better way of implementing this.
Yeah, we were thinking about different implementations, but I think this cart subcollection makes the most sense. Just to talk a little bit about other options, you could have had like a root carts collection, which would reference each user, and you would have a bunch of carts in that collection. Or you could literally include a map field on the user collection and store all the cart items there. But I think the cart subcollection makes the most sense. So yeah, you can see that Ref is adding a product to the cart right now, and we should be able to see the cart subcollection in the users if you update the page.
Yeah. So now when you have a look at the user's document, you can see that we've got a cart for them. And then similarly, we'll do the same thing for purchases. So when the user purchases an item, we can actually save that information and see how many purchases they've made. So maybe on their profile section, you can show them all of the purchases they made. But for specifically the cart, we'll save documents of the ID. Of the product. Notice that the ID for this is going to be the same as the document ID of the product itself. And that'll make it a lot easier to delete things from the cart or to get information later on. And it's also going to be a unique ID no matter how many documents you add, because you're always going to have only one ID per product, and you could always just have a field that specifies the quantity of this product that's been added if you were going to be able to do a function like buying 3 times one individual product. We haven't done that, but it's possible to do that as well. I think something that's really useful to mention.
Sorry, Raf. Can I throw a comment real quick here?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So yeah, you basically are showing one item that is in a cart, but the exact same information about that item is also stored in our products collection. Right?
You took it right. I was
Oh,
exactly going to say
sorry,
that.
sorry. If you're
No,
gonna,
no, 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 perfect. That's yeah, go for it. Ask me that. That's perfect.
I was just gonna say that yes, we're basically, it doesn't make sense from like an SQL or relational database perspective, right? We're keeping two copies of documents in two different places. That's redundancy. That's increasing the basically increasing the storage in your database for no reason. But we are actually doing a service here because let's say instead of storing all of those fields in our products in carts, we would store IDs to reference the actual products, right? So then when we would need to list all the products in the cart. We would need to fetch that document. So that's an extra read. You always, when you work with Firebase, you also always want to minimize for reads because that's the most common operation that's going to happen on your website. Basically, what we're going to show in the next event is how to sync those two documents, not to have different versions of them in two different places because that's going to be a nightmare later on. So let's say a lot of users like have a product in their cart, which is a copy of the actual product, but then the user that maintains that product changes the name of the brand or changes the name of the product itself. We want to update all the products in the cart as well so they are synced up, and that's going to be done with a cloud function, and we're going to see how to do that in next week.
And the same thing would be true for if we were going to initiate a sale, for example. If your user has added products to their cart and then you put that item on sale, you want to make sure that the sale is applied to the users who have added the item to their cart, as well as the users who are still about to add the item to their cart. So that's another use that we can take advantage of in terms of cloud functions.
Exactly.
Oh, one other thing, yeah. So in the same vein of thinking, we're not really concerned about the document sizes here. These queries are quite shallow, so we don't really worry about how much data we're putting inside our users collection or any collection really, because we get charged per Firebase call. So be that a read, write, update, or delete. So those are what we get charged for, and so those are what we want to optimize for. As Andrew said, reads are the most common occurrence out of those four. So we really want to optimize for reads.
Exactly, and that's also an assumption, right? Like maybe your site is very write heavy. That happens. It happens rarely, but maybe you want to optimize for writes. So then you would take a different approach. Maybe the reference ID would be the solution for you. Firebase kind of gives you these options that you can choose from, but we're just showing you the most common example, which pretty much always happens, right? Like reads, like your users view information on the website, they read information. So that's the most common operation that happens.
So now that we've got the information about carts, we can look at all the items in the cart, and then the idea is that as the user checks out, this will be used to calculate a total for the cart, and then you can initiate a purchase and then remove all of the documents from the cart. And so that way, the next time they hit the cart button, you can trigger some logic to render a message saying that your cart is empty. Please continue, or something to that effect. So this is our add to cart. So we're looking at the users collection, and then we have this function get current user. I think it's important to mention that the get current user function is a function from Firebase auth current user, and this is something that I had forgotten about, or I just had an issue with this when developing this, and then Andrew reminded me that this current user is only being returned on auth state changed, and so you want to make sure.
I can talk a little bit more about that
Yeah.
if you want.
Please.
We touched on this in the auth event. Basically, how Firebase wants you to access the current user is through, Raf was right, through this on-auth state changed event you can see on line 4. It's a tricky one because you could use the Firebase auth.current user, but it might not always return you the right information. So if you have some on-load functionality, let's say you want to display, like in our profile page is a great example, we display some user information on load of the page. So we want to wait until authentication service of the Firebase is initialized and only then fetch the current user. Because if we're going to do Firebase auth.current user on load, it might not always be correct because the authentication service might not have initialized at that point. So we would need to use, and similar in this case as well, we would need to use on-auth state change, which would fire in like 3 different cases: on when the auth service is initialized on load, when you log out, or when you log in. So when your auth state actually changes. So be very cautious of what you use in different scenarios. Sometimes you want to use something simple as just Firebase auth current user. If that's you're already loaded, everything is in place, and you want to, maybe like a button click is a great option for that. But if you're rendering some user data on page load, probably on-auth state changed is a better solution for you.
Oh, sorry, I'm gonna sneeze. Excuse me. But couldn't have said it better myself. Andre actually was the one that pointed that out to me because I was having an issue with that. And so this file cart.js is actually just a regular a regular script tag over here. This is checkout, but in the cart one it's just a script tag, and so it'll load really, really quickly, and then that's what's going to populate your cart. And so when we look at the populated cart, we're just getting the items from the cart as well as the total, because we calculate the total from the cart. And then we render the HTML. But just something about the getting the cart, we're just getting the information from the cart collection. And then, Andrew, do you want to talk about the nifty little reduce function you wrote?
This is, I kind of don't want to go into the specifics of this, but all it does is basically it goes over the snapshot docs, and it gives you a sum of all the prices of those documents. It's a kind of a smart way of doing it, and it's probably there's a better way of writing it. We just wanted to have our code like as clean as possible, as concise as possible. If you want to look into reduce, it's a cool function to know if you're working with JavaScript arrays. But all this does is basically gives you a sum of all the prices for cart totals.
Exactly.
Also, Raf, before we go any further, there's a question somebody mentioned.
Yep.
So the question is how to enable debug device in Firebase Analytics. And I think we will go into that a bit later. But yeah, Raf, if you want to mention that.
You know what? In fact, we might as well do that now because we've got the carts, so we know how to get information to the cart. We know how to get the cart information. So we'll answer your question like 2 minutes. Just quickly wrap this up because it will actually be very exciting once we get. If we'll drop the link, if we can probably put the link up on the screen now, or maybe drop it in the chat, and see some of those events happening in real time. But short answer is there's an extension. So if you look at the top right-hand corner of Chrome, you'll be able to see a little puzzle icon. You can click on that. And I think you can probably search. Otherwise, Andre, if I'm not mistaken, you just Googled the Assistant Analytic Tag Manager, right?
Yeah, I had issues with finding it, but basically, yeah, you would need to add an extension to include your debug view. We'll show how to do that. Just in a bit. There's also a Flutter question. I wonder if Dalton can answer it, or maybe you can go in a discussion a bit sideways because we want to show how to do it in the JavaScript land. But the question is how to check. Not sure what specifically you're asking about, but how to check, navigate, observe in Flutter with Firebase Analytics.
Yeah, so in specifics, I'm not sure because I haven't used Firebase Analytics too much in Flutter projects, but the same concepts would still hold true from the JavaScript side to the Flutter side. So a lot of the same things that you'll be able to use in the same way. I know a lot of it's going to be through the Firebase library, and I know that potentially later in the series we're going to show like a lot of these concepts that we're learning in the native web environment. We're actually going to go through some of them and show like, because we know a lot of people are using Flutter. They're almost the same in Flutter as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, so on the web they have, so remember we spoke a little bit about those automatically collected events. On the web, it's page view. Page view is an automatically collected event. So as you navigate through the app, that will be fired and it'll load the title of the page and how long you spent on the page and how much you engaged on that page, a bunch of metrics about it. But on Flutter, all you need to do is instantiate an analytics widget or the analytics package from pub.dev, and then it'll automatically collect what's known as a screen view. So instead of a page view, it'll do a screen view, and that's pre-configured. You don't have to actually, I don't think you have to track that. I know that in some other frameworks like Angular, you do have to provide the screen tracking service. In Flutter, from what I remember, you don't have to provide a screen tracking service. It's done automatically.
Thanks for the questions, by the way.
Yeah, thank you very much. Really good questions.
Yeah.
We've got to, just to wrap up like the basic cart functionality. So we've got to remove from cart, and that just, again, goes to the individual documents of the product within the cart subcollection. And you just use the .delete. You can then again log some information about items being removed from your cart. And these are some points that were recommended by the documentation. You can also check out, and in this case, we want to have the value of the cart in total, and whether or not the user's got some coupons, and then you can use the begin_checkout, and then you can navigate. And then the next thing that we do is we look for users that have completed a purchase, but we also look for adding shipping information and adding payments information. And so once they've gone to the checkout page, you want to be able to collect the fact that they've added their shipping information. And so over here, we just do some styling for the templates. And then over here, we actually specify the shipping parameters. Now, we don't collect the shipping information in this site. But even if you do, it's not something that you would log to analytics. You don't want to put any specific user's address onto Google Analytics. But you do want to specify things like whether or not your travel is going to be on ground or via air. So this is something that, if you've got a serious e-commerce store and you start doing a lot of shipping, this is a good way for you to track how many of your items are going via ground, via air, via train, whatever it is that you're shipping by. And then again, whether or not you've had coupons, the value of the total. And then the same thing is true for adding your billing information. So you're not going to save your user's credit card information. I'm not 100% sure about the laws surrounding that, but I'm fairly certain adding somebody's card information.
Yeah, like
cool.
the reason why you wouldn't include that information is because you don't, like, analytics technically could be tracked. I assume, like, somebody with malicious intent, you could go in and like track your requests and get that information from the website, or intercept some requests, right? You generally want to save it, like sometimes you want to save it to Firestore, but that's encrypted, right? You don't want to, my point is that Google Analytics is like console logs. Like if you ever debugged in your JavaScript application, that's literally the same thing, right? Like you want to see what's happening in different steps in your application, and you do console log and check your console. Same thing goes with Google Analytics. It's like a production console log, I guess, would be a good.
That's a very good way of putting it.
Like you put some console logs in your production environments, and then you can see on your dashboards in Firebase what's happening inside your application. You don't want to log some like very sensitive information in there because that could be intercepted.
And I think since we're on that topic, I just thought that this is something maybe if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. But Andrew mentioned to me quite a while back already that the console is fantastic. It has a lot more than just log. You can console.debug, you can console.error, you can console.table. So if you've got a JSON structure that's based in, like a list of objects, it'll literally populate a whole table for you really quite nicely. Very similar to pandas data frames if you've ever used them in Python. But I thought that was quite cool.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty nice.
So we actually had a question about the emulators real quick. The question is, I'm facing problems in Firebase Analytics debug mode. It looks like they're getting the error device not detected. And the flow is the Firebase console to the project Android debug mode. So
my assumption here is that you're trying to configure analytics for your mobile app, and correct me if I'm wrong in that sense. We will show the flow for the web app, and you'll see how different it is, and maybe you missed a step, or we'll show the flow of how to configure it for the web app. If you still have problems configuring for your mobile app, we might go and go through it with you after the event, because we want to focus on the JavaScript and kind of web-based questions here. But if you still have problems, please join the Discord and we'll go through that with you.
One other thing to mention about that is that if you're using an application on Android and iOS, they both have different requirements for what you need to provide in order to collect information about their users. Apple is obviously going to be not obviously, but I mean they're going to be a little bit more sticky with some of the stuff that you have to do to collect analytics information. But there is a few extra steps that you have to do rather than just enabling analytics through the pub.dev or through any SDK. And I want to say that it's got to do with your in your project settings, your app properties. Once you select analytics enabled, it'll change that Google services.json file, and you would have to update that. You might also need to add some event like analytics collection equals true. Actually, I'm fairly certain in Flutter you have to specify specifically, analytics collection equals true, something to that effect.
You're going to update both the Gradle files and I think the info.plist file.
Yeah, there's a few places that you have to update information to enable collection of analytics. And the same thing I think is true for cloud messaging. You can't just send cloud messaging notifications. You have to be able to, tap into the devices like some form of authentication system so that the user can specify whether or not you want them to be collecting analytics or sending you notifications. Two other things to keep in mind. But quickly about the debugger. So I have the information, I have the analytics debugger installed, but I can, if I'm not mistaken, can I share it? Google Analytics debugger. I can probably just share this link.
Yeah, that's the one. So if you type in Google Analytics debugger in your Chrome extensions marketplace, you should find it fairly easy.
Yeah.
There is also a link in the documentation to it. So there is a couple of places where you can find it.
And once you have it, if I'm not mistaken, they have an assistant to it as well, the tag assistant companion. But if you have the analytics debugger, it'll also show you the assistant. It'll give you an option to install it. I'm going to just show you what it looks like right now. So essentially, you land on a page like this, and you can add a domain. And so in our case, we've got a domain for the local version of the site, the development version, the local host. And so this is going to log all of the events that I do when I am using specifically the development version of the site. But we also have one for the live site as well. So if all of you at some point could enable these debugging features and add the URL to your domains. You can then just click on it, and it should automatically collect that information, open up the website. I'm trying to think if this is the most up-to-date. Yep, looks like it's okay. It will then start tracking some of the things that you do. So in this case, you can see that I've just viewed the cart. So we can see that there's a bunch of different events that happen. It'll be broken up by the page name if it's just a page load, or by the event name. Sorry, it's the page title. It's broken up by page title. And we can see here we have an event for view cart. And here you can see that these are the items inside the cart. So this is the information that we specified when saying, collect this. So we have a list of the items that were added to the cart, as well as the currency and the total value of the cart. But what's also cool is now we can move on and talk about the debug view. So whatever you see here will also be pulled into the debug view, which is the last item in the analytics section of Firebase. And over here, you can see that a product has been viewed, and these are happening in real time. So if I'm on the site and I look specifically for shoes, this should log an event that I looked at a category. And then if I'm looking for specifically the Rubranettes, I can see this. And over here, it's not watching this.
There might be a slight delay, and also it's worth mentioning that there might be multiple debuggers running at the same time.
Yeah.
So it is real time. It's just not exactly real time. It's like with a slight delay.
There is a slight delay, yes. It definitely works on the localhost version, I think.
You might have a different debugger selected in Firebase console as well.
Oh, you're right. I might be. So here you can see that this does trigger the event of product viewed for the Flex Runner TD. So that's this. And then over here, there we are. So we see that every time a user touches the site, essentially, is a user engagement. Engagement is a measure of how much your user is interacting with your site. Generally, you want that to be quite high. Then you can see that this is an automatically collected event of page view. And the page view will have some properties, specifically user properties that you've set. So in this case, we've set user IDs. So this is the user ID for the user that was viewing a product, and it happens to be me. And then there's the parameters that come along pre-configured, like the campaign, if you have any ad campaigns, whether or not it's in a debug mode, the origin, so in this case it's Firebase, the location of the page, a bunch of things, and then the product view as well. So in our case, we have saved some information about the name of the product, and I think that's it when it comes to product viewed. But if we were then to add to the cart, we can now see that it'll load a event for adding to the cart.
Any second now.
Any second now. So we can see over here, it did add the Flex Runner to the cart. So this is an event there. There we are. And it's important to see over here, this is in green because I've marked this as a conversion event. So we can show you how to do that in just a second. But it's an event, yes, but it's also a conversion event because we assume that when a user adds an item to their cart, that will result in some monetary gain. We've got the value of the item added to the cart. We have got the name of the item added to the cart, the ID of the document, the engagement time, the currency, and then there's the user properties. And this is what I was referring to with the pre-configured analytics events. So when we're using the built-in add to cart, it automatically reads the items and populates them in a separate tab over here. So if you were going to use your own add to cart functionality, you wouldn't have this. So this is quite a nifty feature. Unfortunately, the price is a little bit off right now. I think that it's because it's a string and it's trying to parse it. But that's definitely not the price of the shoes, because that would be absurd. But we can have a look at the entire flow right now. So now we've seen that that's an add to cart. And then we look at we've now viewed the cart. And then say, for example, we no longer want these shoes. We can remove from cart. And these should all be events that are being triggered. We'll check out. And then I'm not going to fill this in. We just did it for demo purposes. You can put it in if you like. We're not actually saving the information. So we can say that the shipping information has been added. That should be its own event. As soon as the user enters their credit card information, that should be another event. And then once all of this is done and we've displayed how much the products are going to cost, what the shipping is going to be, what the taxes are going to be, we can then let them purchase the item. And again, all of these are events that we should be able to see over here. So here you can see we viewed the cart, and you can see the items that are in the cart, these 3 items. We then removed an item from the cart. That's this item, and this user, and some of the other information about, like, what page was it on, what was the engagement time, so a bunch of different information. And then we began our checkout process. And so here you can see that every time you move to a page, there's a page view that gets fired. There's the page view. We added shipping information, we added payment information, and then we made a purchase. And you'll notice that the purchase has only got the 2 items that we had at the end after we deleted the 1. And the purchase is considered a conversion automatically. So purchase is a built-in attribute, and it is automatically considered a conversion. And so just to quickly show you how to log some of these events as conversions, if you look under the left-hand side, it's a third from the top of the analytics section.
You can also expand the view on the left if you click the arrow down below.
Yeah. So here we are on events. These are going to give you all of the events that are happening on your site. So in our case, sorry about this, but this we had, duplicate. But we've got product viewed, page view, login, logout. But one other thing to mention, there's always something else to mention, sorry about this, but some of these take quite a while to actually appear on your analytics. So don't be discouraged if you configure analytics today and you're really excited, you want to see how users are engaging, but you come to Firebase and it's just not there. That's because there is 2 delays. There is a delay from the time that your users interact with your site to it updating on Firebase. And then there's another delay from Firebase, the backend servers, configuring the data and then returning it to your Firebase console. And, it takes probably anywhere from a couple hours to maybe even like 1.5 days.
And there is a reason for that as well. Like, it's not like Firebase couldn't do the live event triggering, right? Like, they could log events live, but the thing is, if you have console logs, those like console logs, analytics console logs all over the place, it's gonna really affect your users' battery life and like literally just the performance of the website, because you perform so many different analytics triggers. So instead, what Firebase does, it's basically like bundling all the responses, all the log events, and then just one shot sends it to the backend. So yeah, you might need to wait a couple of hours up to maybe 1 or 2 days until your analytics update. But once again, analytics is something like long term if you want to view your user retention, your user activity, right? Like, it's not something you want to view live most of the time. For that, you have the debug view if you want to just debug and see how your console logs, your analytic logs happen. But usually you would just look at the summary of how your website is doing, not real-time updates.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people are monitoring their sites on like a month-to-month basis, or maybe a fortnight basis. But as Andrew mentioned, it's really a long-term strategy. But once you have the events, you can just quickly mark them as a conversion over here. So in our case, it's going to be adding to cart and then beginning the checkout. We don't purchase is not here because purchase is an automatically configured conversion event. And then once you've marked those, you can have a look at the conversions over here. You can see that these are the total amount of items that have been added to the cart, the value of those at least. And then these are the value of the items that have been added in the checkout process. So we had just configured purchase yesterday, so that's why it's going to take a little bit of time for it to log over here. But as you can see in the debug view, we have those events live. Those are real-time events, but it's just going to take another couple hours maybe for it to log into our analytics. I think that's probably a good time we can talk about some audiences now.
And funnels as well.
Oh, funnels. Yeah, we like funnels. In our cases, we've got users that made purchases. So over here, we can have a look at all the users that viewed the cart, and then they began their checkout process, added the shipping information, added payments information, and then made a purchase. So obviously, you've seen us make purchases right now, free purchases. But again, it takes a little bit of time, so don't worry about that. If it takes a bit of time, it's okay. Just come back in a day, and if it's not there in like 2, 3, 4 days, then maybe there's a configuration error.
Yeah, so like for those of you who are familiar with some UX concepts, like those are your user flows, different like checkpoints at where your users add to your application, right? And you want to see how many users go through those user flows and if you need to modify them.
Exactly. It's a really, really cool tool. And then you can really filter this. So you can look at the user flows, but then you can specifically filter between users that are using a Chrome, or users that are using an iPhone, or you can filter by your audiences. So we can have a look quickly at audiences as well. So audiences really allows you to make some really niche groups of people, and so we want to look at maybe the people who are using a Chromebook, for example. Is it going to show me how this is configured?
I don't think we have a lot of Chromebook users.
It's just, I think it's also because it's taken, we set this up recently, so.
Yeah, but you can imagine that like audiences allows you to segregate all your user base into different groups and see how different users from different groups perform and look through your website.
And it's not a malicious thing, and it's not to exploit any information. It's sort of just to provide a good experience. Because if you can determine that, say for example, Windows provides users that are on Windows have a slightly better experience than users who are on Linux devices, just for example, you can then try to figure out what that reasoning is and why it is that your Linux users are having such a bad experience, and then fix the problem. Or maybe conversely, so you've got Apple users, Mac users, and they're engaging like absolute like mad people. They're just buying left, right, and center. Maybe that's because they've got MacBooks, or because they have a better experience with the site. And so you can figure out maybe why is it that they have a better experience, and you can try to deliver that same experience to everybody. When you're creating them, that's kind of how you break it up. They've got some completely custom audiences you can make, or you can use their templates that they're made for. You can have your recently active users. So these are users that have been active in a recent pay period. Then you've got your non-purchasers. So these are people that have come to the site, added to the cart, and, didn't make a purchase. Some really cool templates from acquisition. So in case you're looking to figure out how many of my users are coming through my Instagram marketing versus my LinkedIn marketing versus my Google AdWords marketing versus organic. And then you can use that again to further optimize all your marketing campaigns. You can also look at different demographics. So you can specify whether or not you want users between the ages of 18 and 24. You can break it up by gender if you choose, language, and interests. So if you have saved interests in your user attributes, your user properties, you can specify that here as well. You can also segregate your users by the technology. So this is why what we mentioned a bit earlier, where you can really see what the experience of your users is based on what device they're using, even what browser they're using. So it could be the brand of device, the mobile model of the device, the category, whether it's a phone, tablet, or a desktop, the operating system that they're using, and yeah. Really, really configurable, customizable. And this is something that we actually hope to use for remote config. One of the things about, or maybe A/B testing, but one of the things about remote config is that you can deliver a customizable user experience to a certain type of group. So in Flutter, for example, for those of you who've used Flutter, you notice that they've got the Cupertino style and the material style. And so you can have Cupertino widgets and material widgets. And you'll do some platform checking to determine whether or not you're on an iOS or Android device. And then you'll display the associated Cupertino or material widget. So in our scenarios, what we can do is maybe determine whether or not a user is on Windows or on Mac. And if they're on a Windows, you can show them maybe a material theme like we have right now. And if they're on a MacBook, you can show them maybe a Cupertino theme, something a little bit more sharp and edgy, kind of like, I'm not exactly sure how it would look because I'm not very good at design, but that's the principle. Is there anything else that you think we should add about the audiences, Andrew, Dalton?
I think that's pretty much the idea, yeah. Like, I wanted to emphasize that audiences and just analytics in general allow you to look at your data, because the data is what needs to like drive your decisions, your design decisions, your coding decisions. And analytics and like this audience segregation really allows you to look into your data in depth. As Raf mentioned, like you can see what devices your users are using and where they are coming from, what ages are most interested in your website, and so on. I think like this, it's a data-driven kind of, I wouldn't call it a framework, but
experience.
Experience, exactly.
Yeah, and it's an excellent mechanism that you're able to sort of grow your business off of, and anything that you can make business decisions off of and actually have the data support is really great. It allows you to incentivize users to actually grow your business.
Yeah.
One thing I think that's also really cool to mention is that you can add advertising within your websites and your mobile applications and have that revenue be tracked by Google Analytics as well. We're not going to be going into that. One of the reasons is that you actually, like, Google's clever. They're not going to let just anybody put advertising on their site. You actually got to be providing users with some decent content before you can shove ads in their face. And so they'll have their bots crawl your sites and make sure that your website does what it says it's going to do, that you have a good experience, that your user engagement is high, and you essentially need to fit some criteria before you can start running ads. But if you already have a website up and running and you think that you could benefit from, having a little bit of extra passive income, this is a great way to track that as well. For apps, you can see how well your app is being adopted based on the deployment, so what version you have. You can check how you're acquiring your new users. So in this case, we can see, we've got some people coming from YouTube. We have some people coming from Google. We have some people coming from the DSC page. We can have a look at where people are coming from predominantly, which countries, which devices they're using. I think that you need to have a specific toggle set to be able to collect information like this, though. So we don't have this yet, or the interests either. This is another thing that we have is retention. So retention is, again, as we said, just a measure of how well your users are using your app over time. So in our case, maybe not as well as we could have it, but that's pretty important. I mean, if you're good trying to have users come back to your site, this is something that you really want to optimize for, is making sure that your users are having a good experience and coming back to your site frequently. I think if there was anything else that I would touch on, it's that in the stream view, you can actually you can track which users are using your site, but you can also track how your site is being used. So if you've got those events specified, you can have a look at which events are being triggered at what time, at what frequency, which ones are trending. So here we've got the events or the conversion events going in green, and the locations that those are happening at. And you can have a look at the users that are currently using the site. In this case, it's a little dormant, but if I'm not mistaken, that's analytics in a bun. So if there are, some improvements that we could make is we would like to actually have that tax be a function of your local sales tax bracket. So we've got the location from the shipping information. Another thing that we can implement is to change the telephone number to match, like, your extension code to match your country code, the corresponding telephone code of the country. And then once you have that information, calculating the sales tax based on local sales tax laws. And then I think that's it. So if there's any questions at this time. I think if not, I can stop sharing my screen. And
Hey, I'm back. Sorry.
We lost Andrew for a second. Hi, Andrew.
My internet drops in the right moment, as always.
That's all right. Do we have any questions?
I don't see anything in specific. I think this was a good overview of Google Analytics. If people, Firebase Analytics, if people have anything to follow up, and also that Flutter example, we can kind of go into that after the event. Please join the Discord link and Discord server, and we'll go over that with you. Yeah, pretty excited for the next session as well. We'll see how Firebase functions work with all the services we've covered already. Yeah, just a sneak peek. We'll show different triggers and different, like, how can you run your codes on like a serverless structure, which actually has a server. But
yeah.
And yeah, I think thanks for coming, everybody. Thanks for asking the questions. If
really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Oh, we have an exciting thing to talk about. We might have a guest speaker, a really, really awesome guest speaker. So stay tuned. We've got 2 more events in this series, and then we've pretty much touched on most of the main features of Firebase, especially, well, regarding web development at least. There's obviously much more features for mobile development as well, like Crashlytics. There is also performance monitoring. So once you've analyzed your analytics, you can also then do some performance monitoring to see why is it that users are dropping off at this funnel. Maybe it's because your data is taking too long to load. Performance monitoring can help you determine why, if that's happening. But by next week you'll be able to send emails, and then I think we can also do the making sure that all of your products are synced up in all of the places. And then once we have those in place, we can move on to some remote config, and using remote config to send some of those emails and change some of the UI elements. And at that point, you should have a fully functioning e-commerce site.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Привет.
Hello. Servus.
Marhaba. Hola.
Hello.
I'm inspired that there's so many people working to accomplish the same goal of creating a connected future.
By having students lead clubs on campus directly supported by Google developers, that's the best way to reach out to students.
It's really inspirational always to hear about members of the community who echo your values and echo your beliefs.
I've been listening more than I've been speaking, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, because I'm just getting all these ideas.
Google, it needs to reach a wider audience and be more relatable as a company, and I think Google is one of the brands that is very good at doing that.